What is up, beautiful people? Happy Halloween. This is episode 136 of Skorch the Fears. We have Amber. I should have asked how to say your last name. I'm going to go with Farooqui, right?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's right. All right, good. Happy about that. Excited to have you on. I wanted to talk with you just because I met you at Vina's Mastermind, right? Our
Yep.
entire interaction basically was just me suggesting to murder you in Mafia, and then we all murdered you. And then I basically apologized for that and then didn't say more because I honestly thought you were just like Vina's cousin at first, to be honest. I didn't know you were like in the real estate space or like doing anything with entrepreneurship whatsoever. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I should have her on to make up for murdering her in Mafia and actually find out who she is. And what's a better way to do that than a podcast? So anyways, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Cool. So real quick, just for my audience, give like a quick resume of what you do, what you've done, just for my audience to know like who you are a little bit. And we'll just start there real quick.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you have a lot of people in real estate. I'm actually not in real estate yet, but it is something I'm interested in. But my entrepreneurship journey began when I was like really young, around 16, 17 years old. And I actually began in the fitness space. So I started a fitness coaching business. I did that for around like 2 to 3 years. Then at the age of 20, there was like a lot of things that happened to me personally. So I ended up transitioning into business coaching. And before I got into business coaching, I wrote a book that hit bestseller. So that kind of helped me,
Nice.
change the direction of what I was doing and be seen as someone who wasn't just a girl who lifted weights, but actually had more knowledge than in the gym. So then I transitioned into business coaching, and then that opened up so much opportunities for me because of, hitting bestseller, building my brand on social media, which is basically essentially what I teach with my business coaching business. I do a lot of consulting where I go into, businesses and structure their systems and processes, train their teams in the marketing department, sales department, social media departments. And then I also do a lot of public speaking, and I also host the #1 Women's Conference in Illinois. I'm from Illinois, so that's actually where I first met Vina. She's actually from Illinois as well, so I ended up having her come on and speak at my conference, which is called the Sisterhood Conference. And yeah, that's kind of, I guess, a little bit about where I started and what I do now.
Up there, right? And I'm really excited again because kill me. Am I back? This was happening last
Yeah,
time.
you're
Okay.
back now.
Sorry, you can hear me, right? Okay. So I'm gonna
Oh no, I can't hear you again. You're frozen.
oh,
Okay, you're like in and out.
God damn it.
Oh no.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Why? I don't know what's up with my internet real quick.
Okay, I
We're
can
gonna
hear you
like
now.
hotspot this. Oh, can you hear me now?
I can. And now I can't. Yeah, maybe just go on hotspot. Just in
Internet
case.
source. Quick, just talk about like how you started in online.
It's still lagging. Sorry, I can't hear what you said.
Hold on. We're gonna do this where I have it. I'm gonna switch to hotspots. Just hold on a second.
Okay.
How are we doing? I just switched internet sources. Better?
Okay. I think that's better. Yeah.
Okay, I just switched to my phone, so I don't know why. I'm just hoping this works well. I don't know why. I've been having weird internet issues. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. So we have a lot to go into. Like, I'm just going to start with the very beginning because I love that story already, right? That's awesome. There's a lot of cool things that we're going to get into in that story. So first off, just How old were you when you started the online fitness business?
When I got into fitness coaching, I was like 16, 17 years old.
Started insanely young. So like how did you do that? Like did you have any fears to overcome? Like how did you even know that as like an idea of like starting your own business at 16? I honestly didn't even understand business wasn't like an option for me growing up because my family didn't like promote that. I didn't really have any entrepreneurs in my family. So like did you have entrepreneurs in your family or like how'd you even find out that like that was like a feasible option at such a young age?
Yeah. So my dad is an entrepreneur, so I always saw, him kind of do his thing. My mom was always a stay-at-home mom until after they got divorced, and she had to kind of like, work for herself and be able to basically, survive and live on her own and things like that. But I kind of saw a little bit of both. And I knew I wanted to go into entrepreneurship. I just never had an idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to work for someone, and that was kind of my mentality at that age. So actually, when I got into fitness coaching, it happened unintentionally. That was not my goal whatsoever. But I was just sharing and documenting my journey on social media, and it started gaining a lot of attention, a lot of attraction. And that was kind of the prime time for fitness coaches, to be honest. I was like the very, very
Interesting.
beginning stages of it. Now there's fitness coaches like everywhere. But I think that time was just a really, really perfect timing for me. And so then it ended up just happening with me documenting my journey. I had a really interesting childhood. I was actually homeschooled in Mexico, and
Oh,
yeah, it was like a foreign country. My dad
how
had a
was
business.
that? You like that? Was that fun?
I loved it. I mean, being like 15, 16 when I moved there, it was awesome because I was homeschooled. I hated school. I got to tan every single day. My dad had a great home with a pool and everything, so I was living the life. But it was also very difficult because, I had no friends there. I had no family. I'm not from there. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know the culture. So it was very difficult in that aspect. And then, yeah, I started going to the gym because I had to find something to keep myself busy. And I was also a very insecure girl growing up in like my body. So I was
Hmm.
a very, very skinny girl. So then I started going to the gym, looking up YouTube videos, and then I just documented it and shared it on social media, and people were interested in my story. And yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like, do you think those insecurities kind of fueled starting that type of business? Like, it's interesting because I feel like I have this theory, and like, I'm curious if it applies to you too. And I think it applies to a lot of entrepreneurs, that a lot of successful entrepreneurs, the difference between them versus a lot of the people who start businesses or don't start businesses is people who don't even start, a lot of times their fears are in front of them. They're like a blockage, like they're in front of you. Like whatever demons you've dealt with in your life, they start in front of you. And what a lot of entrepreneurs I think are really good is putting it behind them, where it's instead like demons are chasing you, which isn't maybe the most healthy thing ever, but like
Yeah,
using your insecurities to push you forward instead of stopping you. Right.
totally. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, do you feel like that it was partially because of that insecurity? You use that to push you forward to be like, you know what? All these people, like I'm gonna be super awesome, super fit girl that's gonna be teaching everyone how to get fit and making tons of money while doing it. Like, do you feel like that was what was happening there?
Yeah, it did end up happening, but in the beginning, when people were interested in, I started getting a lot of engagement. People were reaching out for me to train them and for my diet plan, my workout plan, and I personally had no idea what I was doing. I just watched YouTube videos, so I'm like, I felt like fear in that aspect. Like I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. How can I teach other people? So basically, I was just building up my brand during that time and getting really, really good at learning about fitness, about the industry, about how to gain muscle, about like diet, nutrition, all of that stuff, right? Then I moved back here my senior year of high school and I started training my friends for fun. And when I started training my friends, that basically they got results and that gave me the confidence. Okay, clearly I know what I'm doing, so I can start charging people and making a business out of this. And so then it kind of went from there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this thing that was such a big insecurity of mine as, basically a really great thing for me now and turn it into a business and literally monetize and leverage it.
I love it. I love it so much. So let's talk about I think it's really interesting too to be the whole rebranding conversation as well. this is like something I'm kind of going through right now a little bit, in the sense that most of my career, for instance, has been a lot of residential real estate. Mainly the strategy called wholesaling has been like by far the vast majority of my career. And then now starting to rebrand into other things, into like doing fix and flips, into doing multifamily, doing other things. And it sounds like you've already done that, in the sense of you went from being kind of like a fitness coach. It sounded like you took a break for a while and then you came back and was more of a business coach. Um, how was that? How was that process of like transitioning your audience from from people who watch you for fitness, and then having to transition your audience into people who need business coaching now?
Yeah, it was definitely very scary because one, I was super young, so I didn't think anyone would take me seriously because that was like the main thing. They're like, "What can you teach me about business and social media and things like that?" So I would basically end up using my disadvantages as my advantage. I would tell them how I grew up in this generation where social media started and I know how to read the algorithm. I know what works, I know what doesn't work. I was able to build a successful fitness coaching business. So when I transitioned into business coaching, I actually began working with only people in the fitness industry at first. So I work with a lot of gyms, studios,
Nice.
trainers, things like that, and really mastered that industry. Then from there, I kind of branched out to all different industries. But during that time, it was really hard because I was dealing with, you know, how I said I took like kind of a break and kind of thought about what I wanted to do. I ended up getting diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. So it goes to your
Mm.
diaphragm and it affects the way that you breathe, your heart, and like a lot of other things. So I was dealing with a lot. I had a surgery and it was supposed to be 2 hours. It ended up being 8 hours, and I had like 4 to 5 surgeries in one. And I was in bed rest for a while. So it was basically like everything that I built up from my fitness career, it all kind of like vanished because I lost all the weight, all the muscle. I was very insecure again, physically, but not just physically, also mentally, emotionally, and like every other way possible as well. So
Mm.
during that time, I really reflected on, okay, what is it that I really want to do? I really enjoyed the business side. I really enjoyed transforming lives, but not necessarily like fitness wise, just like making people feel like really comfortable and confident in things. And I knew there's other ways to do that, obviously, besides fitness. So that was definitely like a very scary time for me, obviously, like not
Yeah.
knowing what's going to happen. And also being able to hit 6 figures at such a young age with fitness coaching. Obviously, I knew this career could work and it's sustainable and I could continue doing that forever, but like, or as long as I could continue doing it. But I just felt like it didn't feel like I should continue. And after I went through that surgery, I really kind of had like a whole, you know,
It
rebrand.
wasn't fulfilling. I get it. Yeah.
Mhm.
And like health crises can do that a lot, right? I've had people on here who've gone through health crises. They have to take a break, and then that's a real wake up call about
Yeah.
being like, what do we actually want to be doing with our lives, right? Because we only have so much time. We have to be uber specific about what we want, right? Um, so how, like, I mean, like there's a lot there, right? So like when you were getting out of the surgeries, out of the health situations, um what were the fears that you were dealing with? Like what, like was it just like, it's like, hey, I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing, like is it imposter syndrome, like and then how did you say, you know what, screw it, why can't I be the number one women's business coach in Illinois, or run the biggest women's conference in Illinois, right? Like how do you do that mindset shift? Because I think that's what kills newer entrepreneurs, is this type of stuff, right? So talk about that a little bit. Like, is there any techniques? Is it just more like screw it, let's go? Like what did you do?
Yeah, I think it definitely takes a lot of reflecting, and for some people, they do have to hit the rock bottom where they really have no other option and they have to like sit down and really reflect. So at that time, I already knew it wasn't fulfilling anymore for me. I didn't want to continue doing it, but I was just doing it because like obviously monetarily it was great for me and I was so young, so I didn't really know what else to do. I'm like, this is perfect, right? But then when I went through all the health stuff, I think definitely one, I was just afraid of like not being able to, I had to relearn how to walk and like digest food and use the bathroom and like do like normal human
Mm,
things. So even then, like thinking about that, I'm like, how can I make a career out of fitness coaching when I'm not even like physically fit and healthy. Like, who's going to take me seriously
I get
anymore?
it.
You know, because they're like, oh, like you want to have like the healthiest person training you, obviously, because you look up to them and you want to be like them, right? So I was like, okay, no one's going to take me seriously anymore. So clearly this business is doomed, and now I need to find something else to do. And I'm one person to like need to constantly be doing something. So when I went through that surgery, I did take like a couple days, probably like 2 days to really 2 or 3 days maybe max, like to really sit down and like reflect on everything and kind of like be sad for myself, to be honest, and like pity myself. Then after that, I was like, snap out of it. I can't do this anymore. I need to figure out like what to do. So I always had the idea of writing a book. I just never had the time to write it. And it's funny, like God works in mysterious ways. Like, I never had the time, and now I was in bed rest for 2 months. So I had all the time in the world. Clearly, I couldn't work out. I barely did anything anymore. So I could have sat there and like watched movies all day. So I was like thinking, I'm like, okay, I need to do something productive with my life. And this is a great time for me to really sit down. There's nothing I can lose really out of any of this. So I ended up writing my book during that time. And it was something I think I was procrastinating for a really long time because I was, one, afraid that it wouldn't really be successful. Two, I was afraid that like I didn't know how to write a book. I've never written a book before. I probably have read like 3 books prior to that in general from like the end. So I was like, who am I to write a book, you know? So
That's
I
hard.
didn't feel, like I was capable of doing that. So then during the recovery time, I sat down, wrote the book. I actually wrote it in 2 weeks. I was so bored. So I wrote it really, really quickly. Of course, the publishing process took a little bit longer, and editing and formatting and all that stuff. But the book itself was written in 2 weeks. And then I think
That's
from
crazy. Wait, 2 weeks? That's wildly quick. I feel like that's insanely quick to write a book. That's
yeah,
cool. Wait, how do
yeah.
you bust out a book in 2 weeks? Was it just like literally just 8 hours a day? Like, screw it, we're just gonna stay on here and just keep writing and just get it done?
Basically, I mean, I had nothing else I could do. I was literally so bored. And I think also it was the fact that I knew I wanted to write a book for so long. So I had all of it in me. It's just I didn't feel like secure enough or confident enough to like write the book. And then once I hit that rock bottom, I'm like, what do I have to lose by writing a book? If anything, I don't publish it. So I wrote it. I think I was able to like actually do it in that moment. And it motivated me too throughout my recovery because it was like a wellness book in a way, like a mindset and wellness book. So honestly, writing that book was really, really helpful for me. Like I mentioned earlier, I was very, insecure physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, like all those ways. So those are actually like the 5 chapters, the dimensions that I wrote about in my book. So I wrote like each of those things and how to master each aspect to live a fit life. Because prior to that, I thought being fit was only physically fit. And then after I went through all these real life struggles, I realized being fit was so much more than just your physical appearance. It's all of these things. So I wrote the book to kind of like help myself, I guess. And I knew that it could probably help other people too. And during that time, of course, I was building my personal brand on social media. I was really good at marketing myself, sharing my story. I even documented like my endometriosis journey and helped a lot of other women through that process, which I never thought that wasn't like my intention by documenting it. I was just documenting it to share with my life and why I'm not posting anymore about fitness. Like I felt like I had to tell people, because I didn't want to seem like I gave up on fitness or like quit. I had to kind of share like, okay, I'm dealing with these things. So, this is what's going on. So yeah, that was kind of that.
That's awesome. So this is like a really interesting thing to get into, right? Because I think social media is incredibly important in the modern day, just no matter what business you're running. I feel like I've probably doubled my business just from social media because it makes you someone who is, a person who to be looked at in your industry, right? What do
Mhm.
you think makes people successful at social media? I think I have my theories, and I think I see it in your story. But like, what do you think makes someone successful versus not that successful or not as successful in just posting and
Yeah.
getting content out there?
Yeah, I think it's really honestly easy to be consistent. A lot of people say it's consistency, which of course it is consistency as well. But in reality, it's like the quality of your content that you're posting and you sharing your story. Like storytelling is the biggest thing because that is what gets people to know you, like you, hopefully, or not like you, trust you, want to work with you, and things like that, right? So that was the biggest thing for me. I literally began by just sharing my journey of moving to Mexico, a foreign country, documenting working out. That started my first business without me like not doing it on purpose, then from there I shared my journey of going through fitness coaching, through then getting diagnosed, going through my surgery, and then writing my book. I shared that whole entire process with everyone, and I think that's what really helped me get to where I am today, because people like to see that. They like to see the progress, the things that you're doing. They want to feel like they can relate to you, like you're a human. Of course you want to provide value and education people on social media, but you want to be relatable as well. Like anyone can go on here and educate people. And I'm sure a lot of the things that I teach, there's probably thousands of other people who teach the exact same thing. But there's only one me, right? And I have my story that nobody else has. So that differentiates me. And I think that's what gets people to really like me, trust me, want to work with me. And yeah, so that would be the main thing.
100%. I totally agree. I mean, you hit it exactly on what I was thinking is storytelling, right? Like people just want to know about other people's lives, right? That's where like you get your audience specifically, right? Like if you look at me and your audiences, they're obviously going to be very different, right? Just because I feel like, for instance, just like the way that I talk with my audience, right? Is not going to be the way that you talk with your audience, right? Like I'm willing to bet $1 million if I look at your audience, it is going to be way more female than my audience just because of the way that I communicate, right? And the way that I tell stories and the types of people who can connect with me more just because they're more like me because they're men, for instance, right? Or whatever differences there are in our stories. And I think I just want to say to like both of our, or to my audience, right? Like that is the difference in social media is your story and you telling your story. I think my most viral content has to do with that. Yes, there's the educational stuff on real estate, how to do flips, yada, 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 right? And that's great, but why not go to Pace Morby or Jamil Damji or these leaders in real estate in order to do that? Guys, the only difference between me and them is I'm younger. I have a different story. I talk in a different way. I make jokes in a different way, right? So, yeah, I think that is such a good gem there on like social media in general. So the book, and then it became a bestseller. That's pretty cool. How how does the publishing process even work? Like, I don't like, just tell me. I have no idea how book publishing works whatsoever.
Yeah, so you can do it through a publisher or you can do self-publishing. I did it self-publishing just because I wanted it out really quick, and you are able to dictate the time frame for that, where if you go through a publisher, it's a little bit more of a timely, thing that you got to do. So I think in the future I would definitely want to do that. But for my first book when I was 20, I'm like, okay, let me just get it out there. The point wasn't necessarily to become bestseller. It was more so to have a book. Then, of course, me being me, I was like, I want to be the best. So I want the best book after I wrote it. So then, yeah, of course, it was marketing, social media, sharing my story, and just journey of writing the book. Like I took people through the process of, okay, I'm healing right now. I'm going through the surgery. I'm going through recovery, but I'm actually writing a book. I announced it, then took them through the process, took them through like even the photo shoots that I had to do for the book cover and like everything. People just enjoyed that process. I did a book launch party. And then in less than 24 hours, I hit bestseller. Like,
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. So then, okay. So we launched the book. That's awesome. We sell a ridiculous amount of copies, get bestseller. And then at this point, did you decide you wanted to be a business coach at this point, or was that decided yet, or was that not decided yet?
Yeah, it was decided. I just didn't do anything about it yet. It was like, okay, I
Gotcha.
know I'm transitioning into business coaching. I just have to like put things together and like figure out how I'm doing it. So my main focus at first was the book. I launched it successfully. Everything worked out. Then from there, I was like, okay, now I'm actually shifting what I'm doing and diving into business coaching.
So talk to me about business coaching a little bit too, and like what makes a really good coach, right? I'm starting to get to the point in my career where people are just wanting it from me. right?
Mhm.
Like certain people are just like, how much, like I've had people be like, how much to business coach me? And then I say a number and they say yes. And I'm like, I cannot believe you said yes to that number. I thought you were going to definitely say no because I'm not prepared. I'm like, I'm kind of like winging it right now, right? Like that's not my business isn't coaching. My business is doing real estate. But I want to learn how to be a better coach, right? I've had coaches before and I've watched them and I have an idea of how to be a really good coach. But what can you share for like an amateur coach like me? Like what do most coaches miss that makes that they would make them a lot better?
Yeah. I think honestly, it's overthinking everything and thinking you need to have everything together when in reality you don't. You just need to be a couple steps ahead of the person who you are, coaching. So that's a big, big thing where in the beginning I thought I didn't have enough knowledge or that I wasn't good enough or I wasn't like an authority enough to like coach people. And that's a big thing, but that's all mindset, like you mentioned in the beginning. You just have to be a couple steps ahead. And if people are coming to you and wanting your help, then clearly you're doing something right and they want your help for a reason. So kind of just shifting that perspective is a huge thing. That's like the main thing when I get into coaching with my clients is literally diving into the mindset before we even talk about creating your offers, creating the pricings, how to market, how to build your brand. I first go into okay, mindset stuff. We need to first make sure you're in the right mindset before we can move forward with any of these steps because all of that is easy. Like I can simplify it, you can get it done. It's not that complicated, but if you're not in the right headspace before we do all those things, none of that's going to work anyways. Strategies are there, we could probably honestly find them online, but like a lot of it is that mindset work and
So
working
how do
through
you start that, right? Like how do you what do you like let's just pretend I'm like a coaching client. Like, what's the first thing you ask me, right? Like, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this, right? What would be like the first thing that you ask me in order to get into my mindset and see where I'm at mindset wise?
Yeah, so my first like session with all my clients when I take them on, well, first before I even take on a client, I make sure they're the right fit for me because I've been in that position where like in the beginning I just took on anyone and everyone who was willing to pay me because of course that's how you kind of like start your business, right? And then throughout
That is
time you
money.
get to the point where you're like I can't, it's not even worth, that much money to be training and coaching these people who aren't my ideal client and in the end it's going to ruin your reputation and reviews and things like that, so it's not worth it. So, anyways, besides that point, when I first work with a client, my first session with them is a brand strategy session. So, I literally ask them like 50 questions about that session is honestly more for me a little bit to get an understanding of where they're at, obviously to come up with a plan for them, but also it's a lot for them to dissect and figure out where they're really at and ask themselves questions that they probably never even thought about or asked themselves before. So really like reflecting, taking the time to sit down and think about things that maybe you haven't thought about, like why is it that you want to get into this career, real estate or whatever it is, right? And really digging deep and thinking not just only like, oh, because I want to be financially stable, but thinking deeper, like, okay, why do you want to be financially stable? And like really, really, really like getting down to the like core of everything so that way they get a better understanding of who they are as an individual. And of course, I do too as a coach. I need to know that in order to take the next steps and know the direction to take them. So that's a big, big thing.
I love it. Okay. Gotcha. And then when do you get into the mindset stuff? Is that in that first one too? Or like how does that work?
Yeah, so we kind of dive into it there a little bit, but then the mindset stuff is honestly like throughout
Ongoing.
all of it. It's like throughout the whole entire time, but I like to like in the first not the first session, I guess it would be technically that second session, we'd go through a lot of their like limiting beliefs. It's obviously depends on the client too. Some clients do have a really good mindset when they're starting off and they feel really confident. They don't have a lot of imposter syndrome. Some of them
Sure.
do struggle a little bit more with it. So it's kind of differs depending on the client, but learning how to recalibrate their thoughts and stuff is huge. So throughout the process, even when they're feeling, like, oh, I can't do this anymore, or oh my gosh, I just lost a client, or oh my gosh, I was on a call and they were so ready to buy, but then I said this one thing that messed them up, or whatever they're saying, right? I teach them how to like recalibrate that thought and say, okay, maybe you missed out on this opportunity, but what lesson did you learn? Right. So now that you learned this, next time you know that when this happens, this is the approach to take and not the approach that you took this time because you lost the clients. And now we actually won. We didn't lose because now we know what doesn't work. So we're not going to do that again. We're going to focus on what can we do to actually make this work. So kind of like recalibrating their mindset in that aspect. And that comes up a lot of the times throughout every step we take in coaching.
I love it. Yeah, it's super interesting just because like I'm such an amateur coach, right? I've been coached a lot, right? And like
Yeah.
there have been clients who have come through and like I'm starting to learn this process of, oh yeah, like I got to make sure you actually want this. Like how badly do you want to do this? Like the first coaching client I ever did, he paid me for a month and then left, right? I'm like, how could I have prevented that where like you just weren't ready for it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's an interesting thing to be like, I'm just curious. So, like you said, you know who your ideal client is. Who is your ideal client, and how do you find that, or how do you know it's that type of person?
Yeah, it's having conversations, honestly. Like now I'm able to read people. I understand their language. If they're talking to me with like more of a scarcity mindset, then I kind of have to weigh out like, okay, are they in a position where I can actually help them? Or are they like in a position where, because a lot of times people have that scarcity, but my job as a coach is to like help them get out of that mindset and get to like believing in themselves, and I believe in them. So it kind of gives them that hope. So it really is kind of like, it depends per person and per conversation, but I think it really is just having more and more conversations with people. And then in the beginning, when I took on everyone, I started learning, okay, what type of people was it that I took on because I thought they would be a good client, but now it's like, okay, that wasn't actually a good, idea for me and things like that. So you kind of learn it as you go throughout, I guess I would say. Ideally
Sure.
for me, client wise, I would personally say I love working with women. I work with men as well, but like women are probably more so who I work with now. In the beginning, it began with more men, to be honest, when I got into business coaching, because a lot of trainers and a lot of people who own gyms were men. So I really, really did start with that. And when I was consulting bigger businesses, a lot of them were men CEOs. So that was that. But then when I transitioned into kind of like, not even transition, but when I evolved my business into more of the women's conferences and everything, I changed my demographic a bit more. So a lot more women started coming to me, which I really, really enjoy. I love working with younger women as well because I was like in their positions before, or I can like relate to them a little bit more because I am, younger, but I work with people kind of all across the board. I wouldn't say there's like one age group or one, like man or
It's more of
female.
a vibe in the end, is what you mean. Like, just like if like you feel like you can kind of help them, it's just a feeling a little bit, like in a
Yeah.
sense. I get it. It makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, it seems like a hard thing to like fully vet out, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I like it. So okay, so we're doing business coaching. We start doing that, right? Start still doing a lot of social media. Been working on that a ton. How did the Sisterhood conference come about?
Yeah. So that actually started in 2021, where the idea of it wasn't to have these big conferences. It was actually, the idea of it is completely something that it's not now. It was more so to be like a faith-based community. I'm very like into my religion and everything. So I wanted to bring together people from different religions, women specifically from different religions together to talk about God and faith and how to get closer
Interesting.
to God and things like that. So my first event that I had was in 2021. It was around like 10 to 15 girls, and it was literally just like majority of my friends and like a couple Instagram followers, to be honest. And it was just like a 2-3 hour event. It was really fun. Then after that, I noticed that a lot of the people who saw it on social media, but also who were in the room, they wanted more business advice from me and not like faith advice. So I was like, okay, clearly people are coming to me for business and marketing and social media. So then the following year, I ended up having like my first business conference, still called it the Sisterhood. And that was like the first conference. I didn't have a plan of doing it annually. It was just like to do it to see how it would work. Then we had around like 50 women attend, which was great for me. That was like my first big event that I hosted. I had different speakers come in and talk about different topics. I even had people fly out for it, like a few people fly out for it. So it was really good. Then the following year, I was like, okay, I want to continue this and make it better. So, and bigger. So then I ended up actually selling out. We oversold out. So my venue only fit my goal was 100 because I wanted like to double. So we had like 100 and some amount. So I didn't even have enough seats. We had to like remove tables and bring more seats in. So it was very, very squished, but it was a good problem to have. We had really great speakers that year. A lot of people fly in from all over the country. And it just started kind of growing from there. And my brand was obviously growing and my business was growing too. So more people started knowing who I am and what I do. Then this year we had the third annual conference, which was the biggest it's been, the best one it's definitely been, the best speakers. We've had huge names, huge people, and just people who are really, really great in different industries show up. And yeah, so it's kind of just grown from there. But my idea of it wasn't really to turn it into like a, conference that I do annually or to even monetize off of it. I was like, if I break even, I'm like happy with it. Now it's actually turning into like that's a whole nother business now. Like to plan the Sisterhood conference, I have to plan like 6 months or more in advance and like have a whole team who does the back end stuff and like all these things.
Nice.
And now I'm looking for someone to like do more of the front end so I don't have to do a lot of the things that I've been doing these past, this past year because I also have my business coaching business. So it's been like a lot to balance definitely, but it's been good.
No, I love it. It's hitting something that I think business needs more of, right? I think there's not as many resources and places for women to go in business, right? It was really interesting going to Vina's mastermind, for instance, as a man, because I'm like, whoa, the energy is different, right? Like there is just so much more of a female energy, which isn't bad at all. Doesn't mean anything. It's just I'm so used to like a bro fest at these
Yeah.
real estate conferences
Yeah.
because real estate is heavily dominated by men. And then
Yeah.
Vina running it and there just being more women there. It was a very different type of energy that I wasn't used to. And I liked it. It was cool. It was cool to have something different, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a really cool thing to do something like a sisterhood conference because I think the business world needs more of it. I think a lot of women probably feel intimidated in some
Yeah.
ways, right? Like, and you can talk about that more. Like, I'll just ask you the questions because I'm not a woman. It's like, how do you feel like being a woman has affected your journey, right? Like, in terms of anything, because I don't know where that's going to go, right? That could be anything, comments, whatever. Like, just, I'm curious.
Definitely, yeah. And the whole like start of the Sisterhood conference, for example, also like I would go to a lot of events, and like you said, it was always a bro fest. Like I was the only woman, or like guys were bringing their like girls or whoever
Right.
with. And I would go and try to talk to them, and these girls are like, "I'm just here with my like husband or girlfriend, or husband or boyfriend or whatever." So I'm like, "Okay, but what do you want to do? What's your business? Like, what are you whatever?" Trying to have conversation, and they're just like ditzy and whatever. So I'm like, "Okay, not a big deal." And
Okay, you said it, not me. I wasn't going to throw that one out there, but that's funny.
it's hard to find women
It's
to
very
connect,
true, though.
So I was like, okay, it's very, very difficult to find like-minded women, but I know there's some out there. So I was searching for so long and it was so difficult. But when I was in these rooms with these men, I felt so inspired and like they did a great job of empowering each other. There was no competition between guys, which is great. Like it wasn't like bad competition. It was like a healthy type of competition if there was competition, And then also when there were women speakers, like it was appropriate and it wasn't anything like but then the girls in the room would, kind of judge them or whatever. And I would be like, yes, I love seeing like there's one girl at this event speaking and it's so amazing. And all the other women in the crowd who came with their, husbands or boyfriend, they're like, oh, like who is this girl? And all like, judging. I'm like, why am I in this room with like girls who are like this? So not every girl's like that, but that was what I was surrounded by for a while. So I was searching for a long time for a woman community, couldn't find it. So then I was like, okay, I'm just going to start it myself. That's kind of also like the reason why I started doing annual conferences. Because after that first women's conference, like that second year that I did, I realized that, okay, these women actually are really kind and they do want to support each other. They just need to find a place where they feel safe enough to do this and where there's not men taking over, So I was like, okay, like I'll just create it. So then that's why I continued doing it because I saw how much potential it had in it. And it helped me a lot personally as well. Honestly, like I wanted the community too selfishly. So I'm like, I'm going to keep on doing this. This year was our third year and we actually did have men. Like I allowed men to come as well. So we did have like a handful of guys too, which was great. And I loved how they were super supportive of the woman. They either like did business with them, or they were like the husbands of the women attending, so it was kind of like interesting to see.
Nice.
So that was really nice. But I think like being a woman in general is just really difficult to find a group of people who are supportive. You get judged a lot, by women specifically. Honestly, it's not usually the men judging you. It's usually like other women.
I've heard
And
that before. Like I've heard that there's like kind of like a little bit of a cattiness, unfortunately, with a lot of
Mhm.
women in business, just because I don't know why that is. I'm not sure why. I think it's because there's not so many women in business in general. So then everyone feels like they have to compare themselves specifically to the other women in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm curious what
Yeah,
your
I think
opinions on
so
that.
too. I thought that as well. I think it's because it's very like different also, and they're like, okay, either they're judging or they want to be able to be the woman who's doing that, but they don't feel like confident enough to do it. So I definitely think that is a part of it. Um, yeah, there was something I was gonna say when you said that, then I couldn't remember. Um, but
It's
yeah,
okay.
I definitely think that's a part of it.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. So awesome. So in terms of business coaching, right? I'm going to go back to that just for like a second,
Mhm.
right? It sounds like you coach coaches. Am I wrong about that? Do you specifically coach business coaches, or do you just coach anyone with a business?
Anyone with a business, but also coaches. So like service providers,
Okay.
essentially.
Gotcha.
So a lot of them are coaches. Some of them are in like, hairstylists. Some of them are in the beauty industry. I work with a lot of people in real estate actually. So like real estate
Nice.
agents, who do multifamily, all of that type of stuff too. So yeah, it's kind of broad now.
I like it. So with business coaching, right? Like, what is the most common problem you see in another business or in other businesses, right? Like when you have a client, what is the most common problem they're dealing with that you help them with, and where are people screwing up
Hmm.
that they should not be screwing up in, or like are usually screwing up in?
Yeah. I think definitely like the content creation portion of it. A lot of times people are really good at being consistent. I don't think that's always the issue. I think it's creating content that's actually converting. That's where their issue is. It's like they post every single day, but they're not seeing results. Then I go and look at their content and I'm like, okay, like you might as well post a picture of a tree every single day at this point. Like obviously results, like look at your content. So like, and I'm very like blunt with my clients too. I'm like, okay, like I'm not trying to be rude, but I want you to understand what you're doing wrong and how we can make this
That's
better.
funny.
Right. So like I think that is a big thing for it, like learning how to create content that's actually going to convert or like compel your audience to take some sort of action, right? Whether it is, follow you, engage with you, DM you, have a conversation, or maybe it is to go right away and buy your product or service. So that's probably the main issue I see. So
What are
yeah.
people posting? What do you like? What like is it just like nothing to do with anything? What do you mean by post a tree? Like I'm just curious for my own sake. I was lucky I started with like a social media editor who like
Okay.
knew what to do. So
Yeah.
because I had no freaking clue, and he's like, all right, do this, this, and this, and then it started working where
Yeah.
it started gaining somewhat of a brand, right? But I'm just curious, like what were they posting? Like what are people posting?
I think they just try to like educate the audience, which is fine. Like, okay, educating them is
But in a
fine.
boring way.
Yeah. So it's just like not doing it. It's kind of like, okay, well, that was like whatever. Like they didn't really get too much out of it. Or they're sharing a story, but the story's not having a purpose behind it. Like it's kind of just you posted this, but like what was the point of it? Like it's a great story and you could turn it into something definitely, but like you didn't. So
Turning it
let's
into something that converts.
yeah, exactly. Right. And like actually providing like a lesson with it. Maybe there was a story of how you were doing something or whatever, but then share more of, okay, what was the lesson and what was the outcome? And how can someone else who's dealing with maybe this situation that you were dealing with in your story that you shared, how can they also like overcome it or whatever it is, right?
I like
Um,
it. Cool.
so yeah.
Okay, I like that. You mentioned your faith earlier, right? And this is a really interesting thread that I've seen through a lot of different entrepreneurs and their journey, right? I have like an interesting relationship with faith. I'm kind of like agnostic, but like leaning towards spiritual, right? Like I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to a religion necessarily. I'm Jewish, but like I'm more ethnically, culturally Jewish, right? But it's something that I've noticed, right? So many successful entrepreneurs are faith driven, right?
Mhm.
Like I think almost all of my mentors are very religious. I think some of the most successful people that I look up to are. How do you feel like faith affected your journey in entrepreneurship, and like how did it help you?
Huge. Honestly, it was everything for me. Like I always say, the two things that made the biggest difference in my like journey and getting me to where I was obviously number one, like community and the people I surrounded myself with, but also like relationships with people, but then also relationship with God. Like that's huge. So it's played a huge factor for me. I think from the beginning, like obviously going through my surgery and all of that, I had a lot of faith in that portion. And I knew that even though I didn't understand why those things were happening to me and why I had to deal with so many struggles at such a young age, and it was very abnormal and like just a lot of things, I realized that everything was happening for a purpose. And now I see it, but in that moment, it was just so difficult and hard to see. So it's kind of like cool later on when you're out of it to see. Even now, personally, I'm dealing with other things. Maybe it's not health, but it could be more like other personal stuff, right, that I'm dealing with in my life. And like now I know, because I have such a strong belief system, that it's happening for a purpose. And I know that once I am able to overcome it, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, God put this into my life to teach me X, Y, Z, and all these things. So that way I can actually get what I have been praying so hard for. Like for example, I can kind of give one with the surgery. I prayed so much to God for me to be able to write a book and publish one and become bestseller and all these things. But I prayed that for probably like a year and a half, and I didn't do anything with it, right? Like I sat down, I'm like, I don't know, what can I write about? And then I would get bored and be like, nah, this is too time consuming. Like I have better things to do, and like I'll do X, Y, Z instead. And then like, even though I know I didn't have the surgery and stuff because of that reason, but also because I had the surgery, it was kind of like, okay, now you have all the time in the world. You prayed for time. You prayed for time to write the book because you were always so busy. And now, like, literally, God's giving it to you. I know it's not exactly ideal, but like, I had it right there in front of me. Then I took advantage of that. And then from there, I accomplished everything that I did pray for. I wrote the book. I hit bestseller. I was able to do all the things that I was like kind of afraid to do. And I think that also goes into the point of your podcast about like fear, a little bit. Like, I think every human, of course, we have fear, but it's really, really important to have like stronger faith than fear. Like, that's a huge, huge thing. I usually wear a necklace, actually. I don't have it on right now, but it says like faith over fear. So, just having more faith than fear. It's okay to have fear because it's normal. I can't tell you, stop being afraid, like believe in God and trust in whatever, which of course that'd be great if we could, but in reality, it's not that easy. So it's like,
It's
okay,
definitely not that easy.
yeah, so learn to have a little bit more faith, build a relationship with God, learning to talk to him. Like that's huge. Like we spend time with, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, our family, building relationships with them. We have to do the same with God. Like personally, this is what I believe. Like you need to strengthen and work on that relationship too. It's not just there to be there. Of course, he's always going to be there, but at the same time, you need to like cultivate that relationship and strengthen it each and every single day. And then you start noticing differences. I think that was big for me because growing up, like I was kind of forced in the faith. I'm Muslim, so I grew up in Islamic household where I was forced to pray 5 times a day. I was forced to fast. I kind of didn't understand why I'm doing it, but I did it because otherwise, my parents would yell at me. So I was like, okay, I'm just doing it. But then once I went to college and kind of stepped a little bit away from it, I realized that, well, one, it was ingrained into me a little bit because of my childhood, but then two, I felt really, really lost without it. And I didn't realize how much of an impact it was making on my life when I was doing those things, even though I was so annoyed when I was younger that I had to pray 5 times a day, that I had to fast, that I had to do all of these things that a lot of my friends weren't doing. It was irritating. But then once I stepped away, it taught me like, wow, this is like so fulfilling to me when I do it. So obviously every individual is different and, different religions out there, all these things. But I think the number one thing is just cultivating a relationship with God, talking to him, praying, asking for what you want, in good times and bad times, not only when things are bad, but also when times are good too.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's my theory about how it helps, or how it can help, or at least how I feel like at least my spirituality has helped me is, and you're saying that word over and over again, and you said it well, is like faith, right? There's so much faith needed in business because who the hell knows if I'm going to be successful? Like there's 90% of businesses fail or something like that. There's some statistic like that, right? So you need to have kind of just a faith, especially at the beginning, that you're going to do it, right? There's no evidence, scientific basis you can go off of that you're going to be able to make money in whatever you're doing, right? You kind of have to have faith in something, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that will constantly get tested
Mm-hmm.
because entrepreneurship, in my opinion, a lot of times is just like how many times can you get punched in the face before getting knocked down, or just never getting knocked down with how many times you get punched in the face because it's stressful. It's an employee to fire. There's somebody who's trying to sue you. There's a deal going wrong. You're losing money on something. You're whatever, right? Like millions of stressful things. I was having a conversation with my acquisition manager like literally today where he was like, Jonah, like, do you like ever get stressed out? And I'm like, bro, I'm stressed constantly. I'm just not, I just keep it cool because in front of you or anyone else, because that doesn't help the goddamn situation is me freaking out, right? I need to keep everybody else's mindset afloat. And I can just so imagine, or and I feel like that's so much easier if you have a faith in God or something higher than yourself, because you just know that it gives you that confidence that like in the end everything's happening for a reason, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think at least in my life, in the end, everything ends up being okay.
Yeah.
The way it was supposed to be, right? And I think for most people's lives, that ends up happening too. So that's my take on it. And I just feel like having like an extra relationship with God, even more than even maybe I do, is like just super calming because he doesn't see it, but I am stressing out a lot, right? And I feel like people who have that relationship with God are probably stressing less than I am, right? So it's just interesting, right? Like I've had people, like I had one of my really good real estate friends is a pastor, and we had like this whole conversation going into faith and like how that helped him in entrepreneurship as well as just life in general. So I just find it fascinating, right?
Yeah, exactly. You said it perfectly about like confidence. Like literally, honestly, a lot of people ask me like, "How are you so confident?" And I'm like, I personally, I'm a pretty confident person, but I don't think that I'm like it. I don't think it's really me having confidence. I think I'm so confident in like God being able to do what he does through me and knowing that, like you said, everything's going to work out. Even if it doesn't work out how I wanted it to work out, it's going to work out in some way, shape, or form. So I have confidence in that, and that really helps me, I guess, show up confidently.
It totally makes sense too. And like, yeah, like it's just like it's funny because people ask me that question and my answer to that is just like it's because nobody's confident, really. Like we all are we are confident because we just either we've done a lot of whatever it is you're asking me to do, right? Like it's like there's a certain point where it's just ingrained in your brain. It's really easy. Like for me, that's like closing real estate deals, right? That's my specialty. But if it's something else, or if it's something I don't know how to do and it looks like I'm going in confidently, I'm not. And neither is anyone else, right? Because nobody actually knows what the hell they're doing to an extent, right? Unless they've done it a freak ton, right?
Exactly.
And in the end, if you do it confidently, that's just your best chance for success. And that's just like what you should be doing, right? So,
Right.
anywho, love this conversation so far. We're starting to get to probably around the end of the podcast. So I've got some final questions for you that I always like ask at the end of the podcast. So number one, like just what are some books or a book that you read? Unless you didn't read any more after you wrote the book. Maybe you haven't read any books since then. This might be the wrong question, but like, is there any book or maybe a piece of media or something that like really transformed your entrepreneurial journey in a positive way?
Yeah. Starting one, I have two. So I think a good starting one is Think and Grow Rich. I feel like a lot of people talk about that when they get into entrepreneurship. So that's good. The other one is A Happy Pocket Full of Money. It teaches you so much about like money mindset and how money is just energy, and how after I read that book, money just started like flowing to me a lot more easy than I ever could have imagined, because my perception of money changed after reading that book. So I actually want to read that book again. I try to read it like every 6 months. It's
What's
just
the name of it? A Pocket Full of Money?
Happy Pocket Full of Money.
A Happy Pocket Full of Money. All right, I'm gonna
Yeah.
get that book.
Really good.
Cool. Yeah, I have like 10 Audible credits because I've just been falling behind recently on book reading, but it's a good one. I'll listen to that one next. Okay. Yes. My final question, and it's my favorite one. I really like this one. If you, Amber, could go back to your 16-year-old self, right when she's about to make that first post, or I guess the moment when you're like starting your business, right? What would you say to her then, knowing everything that you know now?
That's a good question. Oh my God, I would say so much to her. I think I would definitely tell her to like be yourself. I think that's like a big thing because I think at that age for me, I definitely was trying to not necessarily fit in, but I feel like I felt like I had to be like her. I had to be like her, had to be like, other people, celebrities, this and that, or I wanted to. But then in reality, when you try to act like someone else or be like someone else, you're never going to be fulfilled. So I think a big thing I would tell my younger self is to like be you and don't change that aspect. But I think like everyone kind of goes through that at that age. It's so hard to like, comprehend it because I tell like my cousins who are younger than me, like, just be you. Like, you don't have to act like wear that because she wore that, or you don't have to post that because she posted that or whatever. But at that age it's hard to comprehend, but I think I would try to like shake that into me.
Okay, I love it. Cool, Amber. Well, where can people like reach out to you for coaching? Where can people reach out for the Sisterhood conference? Like, where can people like find you, buy your stuff, do all of that cool stuff? Like, where can people go?
Yeah, I'm on all social media platforms. My number one is probably Instagram. So it's just Amber Farooqui, my name. Same with Facebook, TikTok, all of them are just Amber Farooqui. So you could DM me. I have website links on there as well to check out the Sisterhood Conference. We do it annually, so it'll be coming up in 2025. And yeah.
I love it. Cool. Stay after for like 5 seconds. I always like talking to the guests right after the podcast. And Amber, do you have any last words before I end this?
I don't think so. I think just thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time conversating, getting to know you better, and not having that impression of you killing me in Mafia because I was offended by that.
I saw your story later, and I'm like, I should like invite her on the podcast so she doesn't just think.
I'm so glad you did. No worries.
Yeah. It was a good time. Okay, cool. Guys, we are going to have Cody Barton on next week. He is Pace Morby's COO. Do not miss that one. That one is going to be very good. He just started a community. Amber, we should actually talk about that. I feel like anyone should join. I feel like everybody should join this community. I'm kind of shocked by how little he's charging for it. I was like, okay, you're ridiculous, because he just helped me fire someone so much easier. Like, I had no idea what a PIP was, or I don't know if you know what that is, but like a performance improvement plan, whole nother thing. We could talk about it afterwards. It's another thing. Guys, do not miss that podcast. That will be at 6 p.m. MST. It'll be back at our normal time. Amber, you were amazing. Thank you so much. That's it. Let's freaking go.